Demolition isn't just an ending, it's also a new beginning. Though many demolition experts share this perspective, the reality can sometimes be far from ideal. This line of work has inherent risks and requires meticulous planning to be carried out correctly. But that's not always the case. For example, an old flour factory was supposed to collapse, but instead it toppled onto its roof, and a towering silo tilted precariously towards a cultural center. These kinds of mishaps are a reminder of how even the best-laid plans can go awry under pressure. Let's take a look at some building demolitions that went horribly wrong. Not all parts of a building are created equally, and this led to some strange scenes when an 11-story office block was scheduled for demolition in Dallas, Texas, in 2020. It accidentally created a temporary landmark known as the Leaning Tower of Dallas. City officials had secured funding for a new $2.5 billion development that would include residences, workspaces, and entertainment venues. The only obstacle was the old office tower. It was an exciting moment, and people came from all over the city to watch it hit the ground. At first, it seemed as though everything was going to plan. The initial explosives around the building were detonated, and smoke billowed from the windows as larger charges brought it crashing to the ground. However, the demolition team hadn't factored in that the elevator shaft was made from much stronger materials than the rest of the building to support the mechanism. As a result, it didn't crumble like the rest of the structure. When the dust cloud settled, the elevator shaft had dropped a few meters and was leaning to the side. It was too unstable for workers to approach and finish the job. In the following days, some locals even started a petition to preserve the Leaning Tower as a new tourist attraction. But in the end, it was demolished with a wrecking ball so that the new construction project could finally begin. Before we continue, let's take a look at an image that has gone viral on social media. The image shows a building in the process of being demolished falling onto a stadium full of people. We haven't been able to verify if this is real or where it took place. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. When buildings are demolished, many careful calculations are made beforehand to ensure that everything goes smoothly and there is minimal damage. The goal is to do the job right and not have to go back to finish it later. But it looks like someone missed the memo for the demolition team seen in a video from Canary, Turkey. The building in question was an old flour factory that had been abandoned after the company went bankrupt. Built in 1928, the factory was nearing the end of its life. As you can see, much of the base of the roughly 80-foot structure had already been chipped away, and it was awaiting the final blast that would send it crashing to the ground. However, when the explosives were placed on the remaining side, instead of collapsing, the building toppled onto its roof, remaining intact from end to end. Eyewitnesses were in shock, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Panic spread as everyone watched this massive structure roll towards a nearby set of apartment buildings. Thankfully, no one was injured, and no other buildings were damaged. When it comes to demolishing buildings using explosives, teams go to great lengths to ensure everything goes smoothly. They carefully identify the main support structures of the building, determine the best locations to place the charges, decide how powerful the blasts should be, and figure out the ideal timing for the detonation. When all of this is done correctly, the building falls in a controlled manner straight down, but even with a small miscalculation, things can go very differently than expected. In this video taken in Denmark, a massive 170-foot silo was scheduled for demolition. Right next to this towering structure was the city's library and cultural center. Demolition experts placed the charges and created a safe zone around the silo, ensuring that the library was well within this safety zone. When the charges were finally detonated, the silo began to fall as planned. However, one side of the silo didn't crumble as it should have. This unexpected issue caused the structure to lean towards the cultural center and eventually come crashing down, causing significant damage to a large section of the building, including important areas like the administrative offices, the archive, and the music school. Those who witnessed the event were in shock, and many reported seeing books and papers flying through the air from the library as the silo hit the ground. An investigation was quickly launched to determine what went wrong, and it was determined that the explosives were not placed correctly, which caused the silo to fall in the wrong direction. Thankfully, no one was injured in this incident. Not every demolition project needs a large team of experts to place explosive charges. That type of work is usually for large buildings located in urban areas. For large structures on private property and in rural areas, it's often up to the owners to handle the demolition themselves. Many times these owners are everyday people, like farmers or small business owners, who are trying to save money by not hiring a third party. But that doesn't mean these jobs are any less dangerous. They still require careful planning and precision, just like the larger projects. The next video demonstrates this perfectly. In Pell City, Alabama, a group was working to demolish a smokestack, but they didn't have any explosives. Instead, they used a large excavator to chip away at the base little by little. The operator carefully removed bricks until it was too much for the structure's weight to bear, causing it to fall. At first, the smokestack came straight down, but then it suddenly changed direction and started to lean towards the excavator. The operator tried to quickly turn the machine to protect himself, but it was too late. The heavy brick smokestack came crashing down on top of the excavator, burying it under hundreds of pounds of brick and debris. Worried that the operator could be seriously injured, onlookers ran to check on him. Miraculously, he emerged from the cab, visibly shaken and a bit bruised, but alive. Drone footage later showed that a large portion of the smokestack had actually collapsed on top of the cab, encroaching on the operator's space. Thankfully, the overall integrity of the structure held and protected him from what could have been a fatal accident. This video has become one of the most watched demolition clips on the internet. In the Czech Republic, in the city of Průh, there was a building that was an old clothing factory, abandoned for years after the company went bankrupt. It was time for it to be demolished to make way for new construction. A demolition team was brought in to handle the job. They made all the necessary calculations, placed the charges, and the cameras were rolling as the crowd watched from a safe distance. When the blast went off, they detonated from left to right, creating a picture-perfect demolition. The building didn't topple one way or the other. Instead, it fell straight down. Everyone in the crowd was amazed at how well it went. However, the excitement quickly turned to shock as a large piece of debris from the explosion shot out and whizzed up past the heads of the onlookers, including the cameraman. Even though they were over a quarter-mile away from the blast, it turned out that this distance wasn't enough. Upon closer inspection, the piece of rock looked to be about the size of a softball, flying at high speed through the trees and narrowly missing the heads of about 5 people. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured during this demolition. In this video, we see a high-rise apartment building towering over the city skyline in China, but it needed to be demolished to make way for another construction project that was scheduled to begin soon. The plan was for the building to fall in 2 sections, but as you'll see, that's about the only thing that went right. As soon as the explosives were detonated, the left half of the building began to crumble as expected, but then it unexpectedly stopped and changed direction, falling sideways instead of straight down. Things were even worse on the right side. That section fell straight down for a short time, then stopped, leaned a bit, and swayed, but ultimately remained upright. This was one of the most dangerous situations a demolition team can encounter. The building was over 20 stories tall, and the way the first section fell at such a terrible angle caused damage to other nearby structures and vehicles. Meanwhile, the second half remained standing in a very unstable position. The team now had to figure out a way to safely demolish this massive, unstable structure without it damaging anything around it. This put many workers' lives at risk. Thankfully, the building was eventually demolished without any injuries, but it was a tense situation for everyone. In Springfield, Ohio, there's the Mad River Power Plant. This power plant had been abandoned for 80 years before officials decided to demolish most of the structures on the site. One of these structures was a 275-foot smokestack. The demolition caught the attention of local news networks who were eager to capture the event, but they had no idea what they were about to witness. On November 10, 2010, a professional demolition team was hired to do the takedown. After the charges were set, the demolition began. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. After a short countdown, the charge was detonated and the tower began to fall. The only problem was that it was falling in the wrong direction. Instead of falling safely away, it slammed into an active power line that provided electricity to many of the city's residents. In the video, you can see the audience running away in a panic as the power lines crash into the road where they were standing. The situation quickly escalated into a local disaster as the 12 500-volt power lines were destroyed, knocking out power to thousands of nearby residents. This mishap led to a multi-million-dollar lawsuit from Ohio Edison parent company, First Energy, who sought over $19 million in damages. Thankfully, there were no deaths or injuries from the incident, but it left a lasting impact on the community. China is no stranger to building demolitions. With a population of over 1.4 billion people, there is constant new construction, which sometimes requires demolishing existing structures. Whether due to unsafe building practices or to make way for new projects, demolition is a common occurrence. On April 8, 2014, a demolition team was sent to the city of Shenyang to demolish the Xiang building to make way for new construction. Because the area was so crowded, the team had to be extremely careful in their calculations to avoid damaging nearby buildings. They used a wrecking ball to take down the structure, but there was one problem. Half of the building was left standing. To many onlookers, this appeared to be a complete failure, as the whole building was supposed to be demolished. But some media reports suggested that leaving half of the building intact may have been the plan all along to avoid damaging nearby structures. It's unclear if this was truly the case, but footage of the incident is still noteworthy. Thankfully, no one was injured during this demolition, making it a safe day for everyone, albeit an unusual one. On May 22, 2013, crews were sent to demolish an old smokestack that had become unusable for the factory it was attached to. Unlike many demolitions you may be familiar with, this one didn't require any explosives. Instead, the crews chipped away at the base of the smokestack and then used a truck to pull it over. At first, everything seemed to be going according to plan, but that changed the moment the smokestack began to fall. Instead of toppling in the direction of the truck, it fell sideways and landed on a car belonging to one of the 4 men working nearby. It also came dangerously close to crushing a worker who was standing there. Using vehicles for these kinds of demolitions isn't uncommon, especially for smaller structures. Explosives require permits, extensive planning, and additional costs, which makes this alternative method more appealing to many. Unfortunately, things don't always go as planned, and as we just saw, accidents can happen. Thankfully for everyone involved in this incident, the damage was only material. No one was injured, but it was a reminder of the risks involved in demolition work. The Clarion Hotel and Casino was a 200-room hotel that opened in 1970. Despite its great location in Las Vegas, Nevada, the Clarion struggled with commercial success due to the appearance of its building and rooms, which according to its owner, looked more like cabins. This led the founder to start a new hotel that would stand out and avoid a generic look. On February 10, 2015, the Clarion was demolished in a powerful explosion that reduced the impressive structure to a pile of rubble. After a countdown from onlookers, the building came crashing down in what seemed like an epic fashion, until it was realized that the elevator shaft had survived the blast and was still standing. What was thought to be a successful blast turned into a surprising fail for those watching. To give some context, that elevator shaft withstood the force of 1,100 tons of trinitrotoluene, or TNT. 12 hours after the initial blast, demolition crews brought in a crane. After a few hard tugs, they managed to bring the remaining portion crashing to the ground. Building demolitions often require months of planning to ensure everything goes smoothly, as mistakes can lead to serious consequences for those involved. While the demolitions in this video didn't go as planned, thankfully no one was injured, and that's what really matters. One of the most recognizable structures in Pontiac, Michigan, was the Silverdome, an 83,000-seat stadium that opened in 1975. For 25 years, it was the largest capacity venue in the NFL and served as the home of the Detroit Lions. It also hosted various events, including NBA games, the FIFA World Cup, and WrestleMania 3. But after Ford Field opened in Detroit, the Silverdome was left without a purpose. After sitting vacant for 8 years, it was sold to new owners who tried to revitalize it. By 2017, the decision was made to demolish the stadium so that the 199-acre site could be used for something else. The plan was to demolish the structure in phases. In the first phase, explosives were placed to detonate the upper section in December 2017. When it came time to carry out the controlled demolition, things didn't go exactly as planned. The explosives went off, sending up a few puffs of smoke, but the upper section remained in place. According to the demolition company, about a tenth of the explosives failed to detonate. While they were confident it would eventually come down, they couldn't say when that would be. To manage this risk, the demolition team returned the following day to finish the job. It took several more months to demolish the rest of the structure. In 2019, it was announced that Amazon would begin construction on a warehouse at the site, and the Silverdome became nothing more than a distant memory.